early part of the 20th century, these impressive offices were major hubs of Great Britain's mighty maritime industry. All the country's seaports bustled with commerce and excitement. Here in Liverpool, many of the world's most important shipping companies ran giant operations. The whole of the city's infrastructure and transport system was state-of-the-art and designed to meet the enormous demands of servicing a thriving and very busy international port. The shipping companies built vast warehouses on the quaysides where their famous liners filled every berth, while others waited to come alongside. And there was every kind of passenger, the rich and famous, business people, tourists and hundreds of thousands of immigrants who came to Liverpool from all over Europe to anxiously board a ship that would take them to a new life in America. There was a myriad of great Atlantic liners vying for this vital trade and for the supremacy of what was the most lucrative of all shipping routes. Among them were the truly great superliners of the day. For example, sailing from New York in 1911, the Mauretania, Cunard's blue ribbon holder. Today, popular national pride and achievement are measured by successes in events such as World Cup football. In those days, the great rivalry was over which country could build the biggest and fastest ocean-going liners. Here's Mauretania's legendary sister, the Lusitania, also sailing from New York for Liverpool. In 1911, the Great White Star Line rivaled those two great Cunardas by introducing the Olympic on the Atlantic service. Then in 1912, her slightly larger sister, the Titanic, set off from Southampton on her ill-fated maiden voyage, under the command of Captain E.J. Smith. Although Britain was very much a front-runner at this time, she wasn't to have it all her own way. Also in 1912, Germany launched their mighty heavyweight, the Imperator. She was fast and imposing and designed to win the mastery of the North Atlantic. Later to become known as the Berengaria, she was to remain one of the world's two largest ships for over 20 years. In 1914, Germany introduced the Vaterland as sister to the Imperator. In the same year, Cunard brought the Aquitania into service as a running mate for the Mauretania and Lusitania. Later in 1927, the French presented their rival for the North Atlantic, the magnificently decorated Ile-de-France. And 10 years after the First World War, the Germans re-entered the competition with a vengeance with two new superliners, the Bremen and the Europa. Launched on consecutive days in 1929 by the Kaiser, the Bremen and her slightly smaller sister, the Europa, stunned the world with their design and speed. They looked way ahead of any competitors and soon proved it. The Bremen immediately took the prized blue ribbon from Cunard's Mauretania. An almost disastrous fire during final fitting out nearly destroyed the Europa, but when she eventually entered service in 1930, she quickly confirmed German domination of the North Atlantic by stealing the blue ribbon from her own sister, the Bremen. For a while, Germany truly ruled those Atlantic waves. However, sea travel in those days faced certain serious dangers, the greatest of which was fire. In 1933, France's L'Atlantique burnt out in the English Channel after only 3 years in service. But the French already had a revolutionary new contender ready and waiting to conquer the Atlantic, the magnificent and massive Normandy. Launched in October 1932, the Normandy was the first of the 1,000-footers to go into service. She was revolutionary in every sense and able to reach speeds of over 32 knots. Soon she wrested the blue ribbon from the current holder, the Italian liner Rex. British pride was at a very low ebb, having been successively upstaged by traditional rivals, the Germans, Italians and the French. But on a very wet and overcast day on the banks of the Clyde in 1934, something very special was about to happen.
I am happy to name this ship the Queen Mary. I wish success to her and to all who sailed in her.
For all the people of Great Britain, indeed for the whole of the then British Empire, there'd never been a more crucially important launching of a ship. After years of industrial repression and financial hardships, and with very little in prospect to boost seriously flagging morale, British prestige badly needed a boost. Here it came, in the shape of a new world-beating superliner, the biggest ever built, the 80,773 gross-ton Queen Mary. Even as she was moving regally down the slipway, thousands of people clamoured to book for her maiden voyage. One of the lucky ones was Charles Chislett from Rotherham. It was 2 years later, in May 1936, that the excited Charles Chislett drew back the curtains of his hotel bedroom and saw the Queen Mary for the very first time. He wrote, "She towered over the warehouses of Dockland, gleaming in the arc light, red, white and black, rather ghostly and apparently deserted." It made him think of those days when squires, before they took on the responsibilities of knighthood, would spend the previous night in solitary contemplation. And so it seemed that before she began her life of service on the high seas, this great ship was brooding on the great responsibilities which were to be hers. Inside the Queen Mary there was an eerie silence, and lights were dimmed in readiness for the curtains to rise on her first regally magnificent performance. The world was eagerly waiting to judge her as she made her debut in what was to be the greatest maritime spectacle ever staged. Though most of her crew rested, some key members worked through the night to ensure that everything would be faultless on the most important day. Like the Queen Mary's crew, Charles Chislett had found it difficult to sleep that night. By 8 o'clock on the morning of Wednesday, the 27th of May, 1936, he was down on the Southampton Eastside with his 16mm cine camera to record this most historic day in British maritime history. Charles wasn't the only one who was up early. Passengers and sightseers were already arriving from all over the country. What a magnificent spectacle greeted them. Here was Britain's massive response to any global maritime challenge, and they were to be part of the most memorable of maiden voyages. With the images that Charles Chislett captured and his own account of what happened, we can recreate that day in May 1936 just as he experienced it. As you approach the Queen Mary, you feel a great sense of awe and humility. You wonder at how Britain has regained this maritime mastery of design and construction. There's been a huge demand to be part of this sailing. Cunard White Star has received over 20,000 applications from all over the world for the 2,000 berths. In the port of Southampton, other famous liners, such as the Union Castle Line's Winchester Castle, are part of an all-star cast ready to play their roles in this spectacular performance. But the star of the show dominates the stage. Southampton belongs to the Queen Mary. Never has this massive maritime theatre attracted so much attention. The BBC Outside Broadcast team has also arrived early to make preparations for their historic broadcast. Film crews will soon be swarming around, taking the first of many shots to lead up to that final dramatic departure. All the time, smoke is rising lazily from the immense funnels above us. It almost seems that the ship is impatient of all these last-minute preparations and is straining at her moorings, desperate to get underway to show what she can do in the Atlantic. The Star is getting due floral tribute. Hundreds of bunches of flowers are going aboard. There are costly orchids and blooms of all kinds, which will spread their heady perfumes throughout the great vessel. How many days must it have taken to create this fantastic display? Most passengers have the usual expensive suitcases and cabin trunks, but some of the more wealthy and prominent people have even taken their cars with them. They too, just like the Queen Mary herself, have been polished and are gleaming with pride as they are hoisted aboard. With the first boat train now due, the band of the Royal Marines is boosting the spirited feelings of excitement and anticipation. And this event is a wonderful present for the ship's namesake. It's the birthday of Her Royal Highness Queen Mary. As the first of 5 special boat trains approach the quayside, there's a frenzy of excited conversation about the great names who are on the passenger list. Henry Hall, Francis Day, Cora Goffin, half the blue blood of England. There are some friendly arguments about the blue ribbon. Are we going to try for it? Some say that Cunard White Star aren't in the record-breaking business. They just want to keep to schedule. Do we really believe that? As well as her 2,000 passengers and 1,200 crew, the Queen Mary also has a staggering 4,000 visitors on board. Thousands more have clambered onto every vantage point for miles around, including every ship of every size in the Solent. Here's the paddle steamer Brighton Queen steaming by. One estimate is that nigh on 1 million people have massed along the coast from here to Land's End. Suddenly, there's a belch of smoke from one of the Mary's enormous funnels. That's caused waves of excitement to sweep through the crowds. Sailing time is very close now. The whole of the Solent is jammed with ships. Many have come from ports and seaside towns hundreds of miles away. The paddle steamer Lorna Doone is giving her passengers a close-up view of the Mary they're going to remember for the rest of their lives. And close by is one of the families sharing some of the glory. That's one of the Mary's smaller sisters, the Georgie. Just one gangway left to clear. It's almost the magic moment, 4:30. The stewards are trying to clear the decks of all those sightseers, walking around, banging their gongs and shouting, "All visitors ashore!" There are Southampton's famous tugs, dressed overall and taking up their positions, ready for the final signal to sail. And now we're ready for the sound that everyone's been waiting for so long. The Mary's mighty sirens will announce her sailing at any second. Those attendant tugs have started to carefully maneuver the mighty liner away from the massively crowded quayside. And as we can hear, the noise from all around is quite deafening. Those planes are flying around like bees around a honeypot, and one's actually towing a streamer advertising vile beans. Famous artists are hurriedly putting the finishing touches to their stages of history being made. And as countless families and friends are waving goodbye, that vast armada of ships lined up as a guard of honour in Southampton water and as far as Calshot are having to move gently aside to give her free passage. Look at those news photographers clinging dangerously to the ship's rigging, trying to get the most spectacular shots. Every single ship is now sounding its siren in salute. As she slips graciously past the British Indian